Welcome to Storytimer. Charles Patrick McGraw. Charles Patrick McGraw was born in 1934. He was a family man. He had been working at St. Francis Hospital as the director of food services for decades. He and his family attended church regularly. He was described as affable and the life of the party. On October 7, 1988, someone senselessly shot Charles McGraw multiple times in the parking garage of St. Francis Hospital just as he was getting into his Cadillac. It seems like robbery was the motive, as no cash was left. His empty money clip was, however, left behind. It seems that the shooter just wanted to take the cash, but not the identifiable money clip. Perhaps the shooter got spooked, was impatient, and shot McGraw. Perhaps he wanted to eliminate his only witness. Mr. McGraw was found clutching a ring, as if he had just taken it off to give to the robber. In articles about the murder, it was mentioned by Mr. McGraw's priest that he was known to carry quite a bit of cash. Reverend Joe Wade is quoted as saying, "He carried a stash. He carried some big bucks, but I don't think he carried enough to motivate murder." Was Charles McGraw targeted because he was known to carry cash? Or did the suspect just see a man approach a Cadillac and think that a Cadillac driver probably had some cash on him? It seems like the motive is definitely robbery. Parking garages offer quite a bit of concealment for robbers. It happened often. In fact, it happened earlier that same day on the north side of town. Timothy Moffett shot a man, Kenneth Craig, while robbing him at a north side Indianapolis bank parking garage around 11 a.m. that day. He fled down an alley and got into a waiting car. A man fitting Timothy Moffett's description was seen at multiple banks that morning. That's way across town, though. Could he have robbed and shot that man earlier and then gone to Beech Grove and committed the murder-robbery of Charles McGraw? Possibly. If you just robbed and shot a man up north and you still wanted more money, maybe you'd go to the opposite side of town. If you had been at a bank or several banks all morning, maybe you would go to a different type of business parking garage and look for a potential victim. McGraw was dressed up a bit that day for an event at the hospital, and he was getting into a Cadillac. He might have looked like a doctor, like someone of means. McGraw had been attending a hospital function. There was an open house that day for the grand opening of a new professional building. Mr. McGraw had been to the open house and even sampled some of the food that his department had catered for the event. He had gone out, it was said, to move his car and was expected to go back inside to the event. It's reported that someone saw a young white man about 6 feet in the parking garage. No one reported a black suspect at the hospital parking garage, though. Timothy Moffett was arrested for Kenneth Craig's shooting, that earlier shooting and robbery that morning. He was arrested in the 2400 block of Riverside Drive at his aunt's house on Saturday, October the 8th. Kenneth Craig survived his injuries. He was shot in the arm and the bullet entered his chest as well. Timothy Moffett was convicted of robbing and shooting Mr. Craig. He was sentenced and served his time and was not released until 2016, it looks like. In an article about the murder, it was said that a slip of paper was found in Charles McGraw's pocket that had the name of a known Indianapolis bookie. Dr. Dennis J. Nicholas was quoted as saying he was not surprised about the bookie's name being on the victim, as McGraw was known to place a bet now and then. He said, "I'd be surprised if he hadn't had a bookie's name on him." But a lot of people place bets, and that doesn't really mean anything. If a bookie kills everyone who owes them money, then they'd never get any money back. This really, to me, seems more like a random robbery. What do the two robberies that day have in common? Does anything tie the Kenneth Craig robbery and shooting to the Charles McGraw murder? McGraw was shot with a .38 caliber handgun. Kenneth Craig, however, was shot with a .22 caliber. That doesn't mean that the suspect didn't have access to two different guns. I think the fact that Timothy Moffett had already robbed Kenneth Craig at a parking garage that same day still makes him a good suspect for this. He had gotten away with a wallet earlier and maybe wanted to try to get some more money. At the Kenneth Craig robbery, there was said to be a driver waiting for the gunman. Perhaps Timothy Moffat and that driver took turns with these robberies. Maybe Moffat was the driver at this later one, and the other young man was the shooter at this one. What evidence still exists? Did they get any fingerprints off the money clip or the car door maybe? Did they keep the money clip in evidence? If the suspect touched it, there's a possibility of touch DNA or fingerprints. This is one of those cases, however, though, it's not an easy one to prove. Armed robbery was extremely common then. There were a lot of drugs on the street, and robbing in order to get fast cash to buy drugs was very common. In 1988, crime rates were very high. Police were extremely busy also, with a tremendous amount of crime coming at them every day. Both guns used in the two robberies that day are very common guns. One thing we do know is that Charles Patrick McGraw had no known enemies. He was very well liked. He was loved by his family. He didn't have any disgruntled employees that anyone knew about. His employer of 23 years, St. Francis Hospital, offered a $10,000 reward for information in the case. One thing to note is that police looked into the 1987 unsolved murder of a part-time employee who worked in dietary services. Lee A. Randall was a 21-year-old. He was shot and left in a parking lot at Terrence and Vandeman Streets. His car was found about a half a mile away. Police did not believe that there was a link between the two murders. The murder of Charles Patrick McGraw is still unsolved. His family has waited many decades for answers. Charles missed out on seeing his children grow up. He never got to meet his grandchildren. He was only 53, and he missed out on so much of life. But there's always hope that a case can be solved. People talk. There may be someone out there who overheard something. Someone out there who knows something. Maybe they felt loyal at one time to a person, but they might not feel loyalty anymore. Relationships change, situations change. Maybe someone back then saw something that they didn't think was important, but it seems important now. Sometimes people assume that police already know a thing, or that someone else might have already told them. But if you have a tip, submit it. If you have any information about this case, submit the tip. You could be the one who solves this case. If you have information about the murder of Charles Patrick McGraw, please call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-262-TIPS, 1-800-262-TIPS. Rest in peace, Charles Patrick McGraw.